Morning. Let's go ahead. It's time to get crafting for the day and gathering. First, I gotta get myself some wood. Just make sure I go to the right spot here. That bug might give me some trouble, but I don't think so. Yep, this seems about right here. And now just to head back to town, cut this all up, and I can start selling. Oh my god! No! Oh, I need some help. What am I gonna do? Oh, bless. She came in at just the right moment. I offer. Bless my prayers to you. Hey everybody, I'm Cartawo, and welcome to my humble abode, and welcome back to this series. Today, this episode is going to be covering tanks. The heavy hitters from the front line, or the heavy hitted from the front lines. First class we have is Paladin, the quintessential tank. They use a sword and shield, which generally offers a high both defense and offense, and they also use holy magic. Next we have Dark Knight, who uses a greatsword, two-handed greatsword. They're very edgy, but they also use dark magics and steal life and mana. We have Gunbreaker now. They use a gunblade, much akin to Squall from Final Fantasy VIII. They're a very offense-oriented class with some nice party buffs added in as well. And last we have Warrior, who is a fairly offensive tank in their own right, but they rely on a lot of self-mitigation and healing. They like to get very, very, very angry. Please don't piss them off. So before we get into talking about more of the specifics of the classes, I feel it best to kind of go over what is a tank in essence. Well, in essence, what a tank does is stands on the front line and takes damage and keeps the attention of the enemies. In an incredibly broad sense, that is what the tank role is meant for. But there is a lot more that does go into tanking. Tanks are meant to watch for where, positioning is one of the most important things. A lot of bosses have directional attacks, and you're going to want to make sure, because a lot of those attacks are forward facing, so you want to make sure that you have the enemy turned away from your party to make sure you don't cleave them. Cleaving is what happens when a large area attack hits any of your party members, whether it's due to an accident or due to you having the enemy. Not even, you don't even have to be a tank to cleave people. It's just generally. But if you have the class, or the enemy facing you, and then a party member just runs behind trying to escape something and they get hit, that would be a cleave. You want to try and avoid that. And most party members will do a good job of avoiding getting behind you, so you can keep the boss facing your way, make sure that your party takes as little damage as possible. But tanks also have another role to where they mitigate damage for themselves. Every tank has the trait. It's literally just level 1 called tank. It gives you a 20% damage reduction bonus just by default, and it increases your HP based on vitality and tenacity as well. So it really helps you to try and absorb damage from other people, or from the enemies. But you also have skills at your disposal that allow you to sometimes interrupt other enemies' attacks. Sometimes you can lower the damage that the enemy is going to be putting out, And sometimes you'll be able to like reduce the damage of other party members specifically, especially if they're incredibly important, like a healer that might be taking a lot of damage coming up, or a party member that's about to die that you need up, like a DPS because you're making a DPS check soon. But a lot more goes into it, and a lot of it relies heavily on which class you'll be playing. Each class has their own specialties, which I kind of glanced over in the introduction, but I'll go more in depth and kind of explain what each class kind of specializes in, as well as just what you can expect to be doing as said class, and what kind of attacks you'll be expecting to use, or what kind of mitigation you can expect from that class. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate a few skills that each class has now, and then kind of give an explanation as to like what that class does. Okay, and just keeping in the same order, I'm going to be demonstrating Paladin first. So like I said, Paladin uses holy magic, but they also use a large variety of sword skills, as well as damage mitigation of different kinds. So this is called Passage of Arms. You get it at level 70. It is a fantastic party mitigation ability, and one of the most useful abilities you'll probably find on the class. So I'll just go ahead and show off a few weapon skills. And my Paladin is level 80, so you're not going to be starting out with all of these skills, but you will earn them as you get up to level 80. I promise you. And here I'm going to show you a little bit of the magic. So you only have a few spells really, but you have a self-heal. Well, actually it's a target heal. And that is one of like the biggest boons of having a Paladin, as well as incredible party mitigation. I would say Paladin probably has the greatest party mitigation of the tanks, as well as is one of the easier tanks to pick up and play, just due to the ease of being able to understand their kit and figure out what they do. And every tank also has an invulnerability skill. That's what I just used at the end there. I don't think I can show them all to you, but that was my demo of Paladin. Next I'll be demonstrating Dark Knight. So, on top of being edgy, Dark Knight is a skill or a class that relies heavily on the management of your MP, as well as draining HP and restoring it to yourself from your enemies. So you'll have at your disposal quite a few different skills that will allow you to restore either your MP or your HP to give you probably the best self-sustain of the tank. I argue that Paladin has some of the best self-sustain, but your base 1-2-3 combo has Soul Eater, which heals for a large amount already, and Paladin only has Clemency, which is it's very mana intensive. So with Dark Knight, you'll be able to buff your own damage, and each tank has their own like resource gauge. Paladin had shield gauge, you have blood gauge here. It'll let you use different abilities. The same goes for every other tank, which you can see in the lower right hand corner of my screen. Dark Knight's self-mitigation is reasonable, probably on, I would say, the lower end of the tanks. Not the worst, but by no means the best. As well as their party mitigation is probably in the same range, but their self-sustain is definitely the biggest shtick of what they do. Here we have the newest tank, Gunbreaker. So, along with having like a gunblade, you can see in the lower right hand corner, resource gauge is called cartridges. What Gunbreaker is, like I said, they're probably the most offensive and like highest DPS tank that is available. With that being said, overall their party mitigation as well as self mitigation is probably on the lower end of the spectrum. The kind of their motto, not really, but kind of their motto is the best defense is an amazing offense. And by no means are they a bad tank. Gunbreaker is an amazing boon to any party. But just keep in mind that they're definitely more about pumping out damage than a lot of the other tanks are. And they're probably one of the more confusing tanks to pick up, but they're still incredibly fun and an incredible pick to put into any party comp. And so lastly here we have Warrior. So like I said, Warriors love to get angry. Every tank has a damage buff ability, but not many of them actually function like Warriors does. So that was right there, was in a release, which allows you to actually use any of your rage abilities, which consume the gauge there, for free, for like 10 seconds. It lets you beef your damage up like a lot. And Warrior also has a lot of like self-buffing tools in their kit and self-heals. So they have some decent self-sustain as well as decent self-mitigation. That one ability where the diamond went around them is a really low cooldown, like 25% damage reduc, called Raw Intuition. And it's such a low cooldown, it's ridiculous, honestly. And then they also have a few different buffs that can help with party mitigation, like Shake It Off, which it gives the entire party a shield proportionate to the amount of health that the party member has. So they're also an incredibly strong pick. Any tank is viable, just find the one you like. So this right here is one of the trials you can do at the end of Heaven's Word after you've beaten the story. So I'm just kind of using this as an example to show how aggro generation works. So if you look at the right hand side of the screen, you will see a party list. Underneath each of the class icons, you will see a little meter, and that kind of determines what aggro is like for said characters. Everyone will generate a certain amount of aggro depending, no matter what action you use, and that's something incredibly important for a tank to pay attention to, especially in content that requires two tanks. There's always going to be one main tank and one off tank. Generally the main tank, even if you do end up switching who the main tank is, will be the first one to take the aggro and stay at the top of the list. Main tank always wants to be at the top of the list to avoid any tank busters or massive damage abilities to hit your party members. If it hits the off tank, it's not as bad, but that's something you want to be wary of, because if the off tank is not second on that list, it will hit a vital party member, and that's something that we want to absolutely avoid, especially if that party member happens to be a healer. Healers, the paradigm is tank, healer, and DPS, and every single role is vital to the success of completing content. But when it comes down to being able to survive, tanks rely on the healers to keep their health topped off and keep them from dying. So you want to focus on protecting the healers, especially because healers are pretty much the only classes that have a resurrection of any kind. barring a couple magic like casters, but you may not be running with said magical caster to resurrect anybody. So you want to make sure that you are keeping everyone alive and keeping the damage on you and not on anyone else. On top of that, tank stance, which is what you saw me use at the very beginning of each of the demos, that is what allows you to generate so much aggro. Tanking has become much easier than it was in the past, because in the past tanking relied on you using the correct skills to generate the correct amount of aggro, and the stances did something totally different than what they currently do. In this current state of the game, which is Shadowbringers content, we're at currently patch 5.25, I think. 5.3 is actually dropping in less than a week, which is incredibly exciting, but it's really important. Excuse me. It became so much easier because with the change of Shadowbringers, they pretty much revamped a lot of the game. Tanks got a massive quality of life change, allowing them to just generate incredible amounts of aggro by simply attacking and doing other actions towards the enemies. You used to, like I said, have to use the specific skills to make sure you generated the aggro, but now, as long as you're hitting them, your aggro is going to skyrocket, and that makes it so much easier. It also lets you focus on the other aspects of the job. And on top of watching the aggro, I said you might be swapping with tanks. I'm going to be demonstrating next how to, I'm not going to say how to properly swap tanks, because that all depends on the fight you're doing. It all depends on the circumstances that's happening in the fight, as well as also what you need to take care of, like deciding if you need to swap the tank. But I will give you the tools that will allow you to do a tank swap right here. The last section here, I brought along Crystal Dragon Soul again, one of my closest friends, and they have been kind enough to help me with these last two sections. So this is going to be showing you the tools. So we have two abilities, Provoke and Shirk. So here, Crystal is attacking the dummy first to build up some aggro. So as you can see on the party list on the right side, you can see that I'm slowly gaining aggro, but once I used Provoke there, it shot me to the top of the aggro list. Now, you need to remember, Provoke is on a timer, so be wary of that. And here, I use Shirk. And that it throws like a good portion, like 25% of the enmity or aggro that you gained onto whoever you use it for. So usually for a tank swap, you will use Shirk on the tank that you're trying to swap it to, and then Provoke. Now please keep in mind, these skills are very vital and powerful, but you can misuse them. At least you can misuse Shirk, as I'm sure you've seen memes of shirking a healer or a DPS or something. And I mean, it's fine. As long as you're doing it with friends, just don't do it to harass others. And also, another disclaimer about Provoke, it will put you at the top of the aggro list, but depending on whether you've had aggro on that enemy or not, it may only stick you at the top of the aggro list by like a single point. And so you want to make sure that you attack whoever you provoke, just to make sure that you keep the aggro and keep them from taking any extra damage. I want to thank you all for coming to the second episode of 14 on Fridays, Final Fantasy XIV. and I post them on Fridays. Sorry, as if the name wasn't self-explanatory. Thank you all so much for just coming here to hang out, listen to me talk about tanks. Hopefully it's eased your mind a little bit about tanks, gotten you a little familiar with their classes, the role, and hopefully it makes you want to possibly try out tank in the near future. Tanking can seem like one of the most daunting roles, especially because you're going to be taking all the damage. Just remember, don't overthink it, and a lot of people will be understanding, especially if you're learning. Everyone had to start somewhere, and if they don't want to be understanding, then that's their problem, not yours. You're doing your best to learn, and you're doing great. So thanks everyone for stopping by. Hopefully this nice little backdrop of me giving a small house tour or walking around my house has been enjoyable. If you like this video, please drop a like, drop a comment down below if you want to talk to me, or if you want to leave something good, bad, anything. If you want to see more content like this, please go ahead and subscribe. And then I also have a Patreon. If you want to look in the description, you can find my socials and my Patreon if you want to help me out with creating new content, making better content, upgrading equipment to make better content. I would be absolutely honored if you took a look at that. And thanks so much, everyone. Take care now.